This devil archetype is strongly suggesting that the contracts that you've signed with life are up for a time of review. Are you aware of the contracts that you've signed, or have you been avoiding the devil in the shadow on the wall? This time that we're entering now is going to expose all of those things that you've not yet been willing to see. And those things that are avoided become bigger monsters than they need to be. So in this video, I'm going to unpack the devil archetype and why it's imperative that each of us look at this archetype and how it shows up within our own lives so that we stand a fighting chance against the larger macro display of this archetype that is very heavily prevalent in the collective world today. Thanks for joining me. My name is Kelly. This is Weaving the Magic, where I weave together the mystic and the mundane through a channel that aims to help you find the divine guidance within yourself that you're truly seeking. There's a saying that the devil is in the details, and I'd assess that as an accurate statement and go a step further to summarize that the devil is in the details of the things that you claim as yours, that you seek to have and hold, keep, contain. The devil is in the details of the contracts that you sign in order to have and gain power, status, support, safety, structure. The devil is an archetype that I've already done a full-length video on. I'll link it in the description box. Please do check it out. But this card specifically, from the Tarot of the Infinite Door, is just bursting with so much that needs to be said. First and foremost being the shadow on the wall that's not being seen. Right now, as I record this, much of the world is in upheaval for one reason or another, all good reasons, because we are seeing the revelation of how much what one would naturally call the devil has been ruling and running all of the systems of our world, puppeteering all of the people that make up our societies, our politics, our world governments. The devil is in the details of everything we've been living for a very long time, and it is the shadow on the wall within all of us that we refuse to look at that perpetuates this archetype, this egregore of this power-hungry demon that escapes all accountability, that no one can control or get to submit, because we're trying to dominate something that is a master dominator, because it's insidious, it's a manipulator. It knows humans more than humans know themselves, because we refuse oftentimes to look at the shadow on the wall and to see ourselves in truth. What I can't separate from this card either is karma. And let me please explain my take on karma, because the devil links with Saturn, the planet. Saturn is the father of time. It is the lord of karma. It's the reaper. And so it is the principle of reaping what you sow, which is karma. Now, some people think that karma is only this justice maliciously served for a wrongdoing, this punishment. No, it is not. Karma doesn't have an opinion. It just has fact. There is no judgment either way. It's everyone's perspective and lens through which we see the world that creates our habits, our patterns, our actions, the things we say and the things that we do. And that is where the devil, air quotes, creeps in and takes us over, rules us by filtering our perspective through, is this a threat to my ego? Is this a threat to my security? Is this a threat to the things that I want to call mine? to have and to hold. And now listen, there's honor in what we call ours if we are safeguarding and providing guardianship for those that are in our care, in our charge, like our children or animals, or those that cannot protect, defend, or advocate for themselves. All human beings, all things that are worthy of consideration. It's noble and loyal according to my moral principles, but who am I? This is just my perspective. To call ownership to those things, but most importantly, more importantly than anything else, ownership of yourself, which means leadership of yourself, which means accountability to whether or not you've allowed the devil to color your perspective of, I must constantly be scanning for threats against my ego, or the opposite, which is what the mirror of the devil truly points us to if we can stop scapegoating it and instead look at it as a part of us, as something that we judge within ourselves, and therefore perpetuating the cycle of judging it in others and keeping this archetype, this egregore, this enormous energy alive and abundant and in power, because we give all of our focus and our fear and our energy and our attention to it. We feed it. And now we can take accountability without also taking on shame, because this energy has been fed for thousands of years or more. And this archetype is strong and elusive, but that's its biggest strength, is its ability to be elusive. And so the answer or the resolution or the freedom, the keys to the proverbial lock that the devil holds us in chains with, is that we look at it, we illuminate it, we walk down these steps into the basement of the infinite potential that perhaps I could be harboring this thing within me and too afraid to look at it, therefore pointing my fingers, creating more separation, more outside of myself to defend my ego against, isolating myself into a position where the only person I've got any business to do with, or the only energy, is the devil, which will promise all of these things because it says they're the problem. Once you get them out of the way, once you fix that problem, and it puts something outside of you, and it promises you the power to do that thing outside of you, when all the while the trick is, which we fail to look at the trick. We need to stop looking at what it's showing us and look instead at the opposite of what it's showing us, which is ourselves. Where do I have power and authority within myself? Where do I have the power and authority as to where I put my attention and my focus, as to how deeply I listen, how closely I pay attention, how much I desire to experience a certain kind of experience in the world. That means I need to actually notice the good and the beautiful and the opportunity and the warmth and the kinship of being around other people more than I notice the threat, of the beauty of community, of the potentials and the possibility of collaboration and interdependence instead of hyper-independence based on fear. Once we start to look at what the devil isn't showing us, we can automatically be free, because it dissolves the illusion that there are any chains at all. The chains are perspective. So once we start choosing more and more and more a new perspective, once we start choosing to have different conversations that aren't about all of the bad in other people and in the world and all of the domination and the power, which, please don't get me wrong, does exist. It does need to be exposed. It does need to be illuminated. It does need to be talked about. This isn't only an inside job. There is plenty on a large scale macros that is being discovered. And also, at the same time, I would wager that everyone has an inside job to tend to, as far as what is the devil in me, the thing I refuse to accept. What is the thing? And now I'm not saying that everyone's out there doing some intentionally wrong, bad thing, like all of the stuff that we're seeing in the media at the time that I'm recording this. There's a special category of those people who have sold their ability to have a will and a soul and their own divine experience, because they've bought in to the idea that someone could give them more power than they could derive through themselves. And they signed a contract. Therefore, the grace of God go I. This is the contract that I signed to be human this time around in this incarnation. But I make no mistake about understanding that in many lifetimes, and hell, in this lifetime, in many other people's stories, I serve as the devil archetype. I can name a few off the top of my heart because it aches sometimes knowing that there are people that see me differently than I know myself to be, and also, however, it's none of my business to try to control or manipulate other people's experiences. That's the devil's work. I am not that. The devil is a part of God. It is a part of all creation. It is a part of the divine experience that's being played out here within and among and upon humanity. And we also at the same time get to decide how much energy we give it in our own personal lives, in our cultures among us, in how we treat one another, and how we hold ourselves accountable equally as other people, how we give ourselves grace equally as other people, as we hold strong boundaries as to what our values are. And we also understand that we don't know what we would do given someone else's shoes, in someone else's situation. I don't know what kind of deals I would be willing to make with the proverbial devil in order to protect, to save, to help and assist those that I love deeply. If I were in certain situations that I've never been in, thankfully, by the grace of the contracts I've signed, by the grace of who I am in this lifetime. But I know that that's grace, and that's circumstance, and that's perspective, and that's also privilege. I'm privileged to be who I am in this lifetime, awake and aware, and faced with the choice and the knowledge that the devil is within me, and I can choose to see it, integrate it, acknowledge it, and observe it, and notice it, and not hide from it, so that I can account for its moves. That adage of keeping your friends close, but your enemies closer. I have no enemies. The devil is close because I see it. I see it as a teacher. I see it as a student. I see it as every part of all of us that I'm no longer refusing to acknowledge. And that shows up differently in all of us. And when we put it all out on a sliding scale, there are some on the saintly end, and there are some on the soulless, anti-life end. And then there's a whole gradient of gray in between. A vast, huge gradient of gray. And depending on each person's individual moral compass, some things are abhorrent and some things are play. And that is a truth and a reality, and I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but that is the reality. All things exist. There are sick awful humans that derive pleasure from sick, awful, terrible things. And we have to ask ourselves how much we participate in that. When was the last time you watched a movie where a woman was being assaulted and you didn't turn it off? Or someone was being beaten to death and you didn't turn it off? How often do you use words like, yeah, kill him, or things like that watching sports? I mean, this is in our language. It's in the spells that we cast all the time. We laugh at suffering. Here in the States, like half of the jokes are about physical violence. There's so much that we do to participate in this devil archetype. It is not just outside of you. And if you think that it is, you are perpetuating, you are dealing with the devil, you are being played by the devil, you are its instrument. Because refusing to be aware is the devil's playground. It's not idle hands, it's idle brain. Because the devil's playground, truthfully, is the brain, it's the mind. It captures and captivates anyone who's not paying attention to what the mind is doing with your one vehicle for your soul to experience this life. And if you're not paying attention to what the devil's doing in its playground, not just the one outside of you, not just the ones outside of you, but the one in you, the one you are. Because we live on an earth world that's ruled by Saturn, by this, the Lord of Karma, of time. And what we reap, we sow. And so every small deal that we make is not a small deal, it's a deal with the devil, with time. We are selling our time every moment. Right now, you're making a deal to listen to me. And I'm not the devil. However, I know that the archetype exists within me and everyone else to greater or lesser degree, depending on our choices, depending on our focus on mastering self and not trying to conquer the world outside of us, because that's the air quotes worst manifestation of the actual devil, is the conquering, capturing, and holding against others' will, of others, of the world at large, of systems, of corporations, of government, like we're seeing. Those are the worst manifestations, and we don't individually have power to take that down. However, we do individually have the only power that each of us has individually over ourselves to check our will, check our focus, check our awareness of the shadow on the wall. And then look down there in the basement on the card. There is a doorway of infinite potential. And it's not up the stairs in some imaginary ascended place where you're promised some heaven or living life everlasting or some eternal garden of paradise. That doesn't exist unless you create it. And if you're busy living your whole life fearing the devil so much that you refuse to look at it, you're paying attention more to the devil than you are to the paradise, and that's what you're creating. Instead, if you descend into yourself, into the core of who you are, and ask, what are my values? What are the deals I'm making? How much am I willing to sacrifice the conveniences of this time-structured reality to get in touch with myself and to align with my values, no matter how much time it takes me, so that I can seek beyond, within, deeper than only the deals that the devil is willing to make. There are greater deals out there. Tell the devil no deal. Deal's off. Deal revoked. Burn the contract. Do that by addressing the devil in you and how it functions. And I'm preaching to you like I'm preaching to me, because I channel these things and it gives me the guide through which to live my life. This is the deal that I make, that I have to be the fool instead of being the jester, because I don't want to be a tool used by the devil, pretending that I could be a king one day. Instead, I'll be the scribe. Instead, I'll be the fool. Instead, I'll be the one that's willing to open up to the new concept that's coming through and not be reassured something that can't be reassured, because there's too many moving parts in this world. There's too many things that need to be harmonized for anyone to say to you with any concrete surety, this is what you will have, definitely. There's always some details. The devil is in the details and the fine print. And the divine is in the openness, the spaciousness, the willingness to find out, to take a risk and a bet on yourself. That you don't need to make a deal with the devil, that you can figure it out on your own accord, that gnosis, direct experience of the living divine, is more than enough and will grant you all of your desires, because your heart and your focus is on what the opportunity is that's available to you and not the threat that's always ever present on the horizon. That's how the devil captures you. We have to be a fool for love. We have to be a fool for life. We have to be willing to be foolish enough to bet on ourselves so that you might know more. Because the more you know about yourself, the less you can be controlled by those who know you very well. The devil is in the details of how we live, of what we choose, of what we speak. And we can either choose to look at that shadow on the wall or keep it locked away in a basement. But does that sound like any way to treat anything? Do we want to keep feeling enemy? Do we want to keep feeling threat? Do we want to keep feeling I'm less powerful than, I need to be in fear of? Or do we want to feel I see you, I understand you, I will hear you out, and I will also do what is appropriate considering my values? Thank you so much for listening to this video, for doing the work of seeing, of not avoiding, of not running, of confronting, of addressing. Because what remains unseen cannot be corrected or adjusted or helped or alchemized. And things that remain unacknowledged build resentment. And resentment breeds hate. And hate eventually wants to take action. And so it's just negligent at this point in humanity's time to avoid the devil. Truly, it's negligent. So don't neglect the spirit. Don't neglect your soul. Don't neglect the contracts that you've been signing. It's time for review.